evening, everyone. I encourage everyone to take their seats. Please do be seated. So, thank you so much for joining us this evening. For those of you who don't know me, I'm in this department, the new-ish director of the British Museum. And it's wonderful to welcome you here this evening to see old friends and new faces, and of course to celebrate this remarkable publication, Masterpieces of the Farjam collection of Islamic and Middle Eastern art. The four books which you see proudly displayed on these two tables, I think it takes two tables for these four books because they're quite tomes, are visually stunning and include highlights from an exceptional collection covering art in the Islamic world from the earliest times up to and including contemporary Middle Eastern art. They feature painting, works on paper, photography, sculpture, installations, and video. The Farjam Foundation talks about the books as providing, quote, a cross-cultural experience demonstrating continuity, dialogue, and influence from within as well as between cultures throughout the centuries. And I think this important connection between things, ideas, culture, and people is really at the core of what we do here at the British Museum. And indeed, it goes back to our defining purpose in our founding act of 1753, when we talked about there being a connection between arts and sciences. You can see this writ large in our current exhibition, The Silk Roads, which is just open, which I hope you'll have a chance to see. And you can also see this on display in our permanent galleries, such as the Al-Bukhari Foundation Gallery of the Islamic World, which will be open for you to visit this evening. Now, of course, we're gathered here this evening thanks to the Farjam Foundations, but also thanks to Venetia Porter, former senior curator for Islamic and contemporary Middle East art at the British Museum. And I want to pay tribute to everything that Venetia's done here at the museum. I'm afraid the clock chimes at 7, so I'm competing for your attention. Saved by the bell. And of course, Venetia's played a key role in arranging tonight's event and has founded the Contemporary and Modern Middle Eastern Arts Acquisition Group here at the museum, which of course, as many people know, is a wonderful community of patrons who support the acquisition of contemporary and modern Middle Eastern arts. And of course, Dr. Farjam, who sadly can't be with us here this evening, has been a generous supporter of this group, and we're very grateful for this. And now, without further ado, and I should say, unfortunately, I have to run because I have to go for the trustee events, I'd like to hand over to Dr. Francesca Leoni, who will introduce you to the panel. So over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Cullinan, for your kind words, and good evening to you all. I see you are many. It's delightful to see you all here tonight. A warm welcome to our panel, Dr. Venetia Porter, who has already been introduced, Professor Charles Melville, Emeritus Professor of Persian History at Cambridge, and Dr. Julian Raby, who is also an Islamic art historian of great fame and spent over 20 years as director of the Smithsonian National Institution of Film and Theatre Gallery in Washington, D.C., and before that in Oxford. So a panel of renowned specialists to explore really and celebrate what is a momentous achievement in the collective history of Dr. Farjam, who unfortunately has not been able to join us tonight. The Farjam collection is probably known to many of you, and is indeed one of the largest collections of both Islamic, Middle Eastern art and modern and contemporary art in private hands. I am told that we are looking at approximately 6,000 objects, 1,200 artists, without counting the many anonymous hands that contributed to the historic part of the collection to the earlier period. And in the preface to the first volume of the set, which you can see here, and incidentally the volumes are spread both in this room and in the next room, so I do encourage you to take some time and flip through the pages. They are a wonderful set of volumes. There are two sets of volumes, and the first volume set the masterpieces of Islamic art from the Farjam collection really gives us a sense of what drove his interests and passion and how this incredible collection came together. He speaks about his profound curiosity and admiration for the world of art, the ability of art indeed to communicate. And he writes also about how his education, his upbringing, his mother inspired him in all things literary and artistic. And there's a beautiful sentence which I really wrote down here, just because it captures the spirit of also of Shiraz, the city where he grew up. And he says, you know, it's the city of poets, of roses and nightingales, where the night skies glowed luminously with stars so brilliant that as a form of praise, some even mentioned carrying parasols to shield themselves from their light. And that kind of captures really the sophistication that he was really exposed to culturally growing up in Iran. As a collector, Dr. Farjam soon came to the realization that the mission of a collector is also that of cultural preservation. And these idea and this drive, alongside that of education, really formed two main avenues of the way in which not only he collected, but also the way he then shared and started to share the collection with the broader public. And we know that, in fact, the Farjam Foundation in Dubai is a place where everybody can go from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m., which is incredible, a little bit longer than the museum, to enjoy aspects of this collection, which, you know, are presented in numerous exhibitions and public programming for the benefit of the local public. And added to these drives are also his desire to encourage artistic creativity. And in his essay, he speaks about the way in which, going back to Iran after the Iran-Iraq war, he decided to support local artists, therefore assembling a collection which is absolutely extraordinary of modern and contemporary art. And this is, I believe, one of the fewest collections that really span what is the historic material, what some of us are more acquainted with, but incredibly embrace also the modern and contemporary world in ways that are relevant for the region, but in ways that are also specifically relevant to the UAE, and particularly as a region where Farjam has spent his last probably 30 plus years. And there is something quite interesting about the role that this collection therefore will play in understanding the local, contemporary local artistic production against the rest of the production from the region. Two volume catalogs, 5 editors, about 32 contributors. The clock agrees. About 800 works selected for the volumes that you have in front of you. I counted the pages, we are nearing 1,300 pages. This gives you a sense of the scope of these publications. And so I would like to turn to Venetia, who is one of the editors, incidentally, of both volumes. So therefore having a double role in shaping and forging both the volumes associated with the Islamic material, but also the modern and contemporary one, alongside her colleague, another famous curator of the British Museum, Dr. Sheila Camby. And particularly speaking about the Islamic volumes to begin with, I would like to know essentially how this book came about and how did you go on selecting from amongst what seems to be a very numerous a range of objects, a collection of works that can be representative of very significant themes, but at the same time speak about the collection itself.
Thank you very much. And it's just so wonderful to see so many people here tonight. Absolutely lovely. Well, how did this all start? Well, actually, very many years ago, Roxanne will remember how it started. And I think the thing that is extraordinary about Dr. Farjam is that he started acquiring this material, the Islamic and the modern and contemporary, and he's always wanted to make a contribution in the sense of he would put these works on display in Dubai, and then he wanted to do a book. He wanted to have this as a legacy of really showing the extraordinary nature of this collection. So, but the real question, and I honestly can't remember how many years back we go, but it was like how do you do that? And in the very early days, there were conversations between Marcus Fraser, who's here, and myself, and we were charged with how do we put this all together. Initially, I have to say there was one book. It was going to be just one book, and it was going to be the Islamic and the modern and contemporary in together. But I think all of you know Dr. Farjam. One book was absolutely not going to be enough, and it was 4 books. So we sort of divided it up, and Sheila Canby, who very sadly cannot be with us, she did an incredible job. She really worked on the Islamic volumes, now we call them, and she really did do an astounding job. And with both the Islamic and also the modern and contemporary, it was literally armies of people. And I'm just going to very quickly give you a sense of what it was that we were trying to do here and how it was divided up, starting with the Islamic. So here we are. I don't know if you might be able to see this a little bit, but I wanted to give you a sense of actually this, because you probably won't be able to see it, but I now have to read it from here. So you can see that we've got all of these contributors there. The sections are faith and the Quran, science and learning, animals and birds in Islamic art, private and public splendor, the spoken word that Charles is going to speak about, and enduring legacies. And the way that it was organized was that there would be a big essay by an amazing array of scholars, but then also the entries. And I don't know, those of you who've tried to write entries of these kinds of optics, they are not easy to do. And these entries represent a huge amount of research on top of the essays. And some of the writers are actually here. Marcus, William Robertson, but then before I move on to give you a glimpse of the book, I really want to talk about just briefly mention the people who did so much of the donkey work, and that is the editorial team at Yale. They're absolute joy to work with, quite extraordinary group of people, and Mark Eastman, who's the editorial director at Yale. Then for the Islamic, the saintly Miranda Harrison, who's here. The most wonderful, you'll see as you go through the books, the design is absolutely incredible. And this was done by Adrian Hunt, and then the production by Marina Asenjo. And then there are other editors who are involved in the modern and contemporary, and I'll talk about that later. So then the photography was done by John Williams and Saul Peckham. So you'll see that when you go through these books, the quality is absolutely extraordinary. And Dr. Farjam is there all the time. So he wasn't one of these people who would, just get on with it. Here's a pile of images and you do the writing. So absolutely not. He was there. And sometimes I have to say driving is a bit mad. In the nicest possible way, of course. But it was really because he wanted the best, and he absolutely did get the best with these books. So I'm just going to very quickly show you a few highlights, and then I'm going to turn to Charles, who's going to speak about something beautiful. He's going to tell us stories, I think. Yeah, I think that's the plan. So just a few highlights, and then as Marcus is here, so he wrote the entries on some of these very early. There's the black Quran, the blue Quran is very beautiful. The basic Noor Quran, two lines from it. Then there's everything you could imagine, really. Glass, beautiful ceramics, wonderful alam, beautiful calligraphies and a marriage certificate. You just have to get the book to know all the detail. I'm just going to give you like an overview. Astrolabe, it's beautiful painting here. amazing cultural paintings, beautiful Seljuk robe, 12th, 13th century carpets, and quite an extraordinary collection, really beautiful metalwork. It really is a representative collection of Islamic art. It really is quite extraordinary. And then the arts in the book, of course, is a very, very important section within the book. And I'm now going to turn to Charles to tell us some stories.
Thank you. Yes. Well, am I too loud? It's Gerald Moore. Yes, I can move on when I need to. Yes, so I contributed a short essay, actually, on the so-called spoken word, which in itself is quite an interesting concept, because we're not listening to spoken words here, we're reading them in a manuscript, and the whole question of how an orally recited or created poem eventually becomes canonized in a text, and then copied, and then adorned if it's sufficiently prestigious and so on, is actually quite an interesting concept on its own. I think to call it the spoken word is quite interesting in itself. And I think it's fair to say that Dr. Farjam had several more pages of the Shahnameh than have ended up in this catalogue. And I think I wrote something about all of them, not knowing which ones were going to end up in the catalogue. I'm not absolutely certain about that. But Sheila Canby wrote the descriptions of all the individual pages, so I just wrote a small essay at the beginning about the Shahnameh and how a fundamental example it is really of the importance of poetry in Persian culture. And of course, in the arts of the book, the Shahnameh being the first book that was really seriously illustrated and continued to be so well into the 19th century. There are lots of stories. I'm sort of interested already in what Venetia said in looking through the book, because a collection is a collection. It usually tells you something about the collector. And my impression of Dr. Farjam is all the things that have already been said. I mean, incredibly enthusiastic, incredible attention to detail, love of the art, desire to promote the art and to educate people in it and to share his collections with other people. But then when you come to the choice of things he bought, I found it quite difficult to find a thread that made any sense. A lot of the manuscripts, not necessarily the ones I've chosen, I can't remember which ones actually, produced in Shiraz, which may have something we've gone twice or twice or back here, that's the first one. And they tend to be by classic texts by well-known painters or calligraphers particularly, with nice subjects, and they're mainly single leaves, which of course is what a lot of collections are. And these are clearly a very early Safavid period, manuscripts dated about 1500, 1501, with the famous Safavid baton, the Taj, on display. The story on the left, which is different from this, no, it's the same one, it's just a close-up. This picture here shows the death of Faroud, who was the sort of innocent victim in a way of a problem. And the scene, he eventually got killed by the Iranians, even though he was the son of the Shah, and the brother-in-law of Siyavush. And Tus, the naughty Tus, took his army to defeat Afrasiyab the wrong way, having been told not to go that way, but he did, where Faroud had his castle. And it ended in tears ended in tears for everybody, of course, because not only did Tus several of his own relatives in the individual combats, but also Farouz himself lost his life. And down on the floor there, I don't know if this is a pointer, is his mother, Jaril, who killed herself on his tomb. Well, I mean, this is just an amazing story, and one of the amazing episodes in the Shahnameh, and something obviously that, excuse me, Dr. Farjam picked up. I chose this because it's a story of Alexander. I don't need to go into all these stories, they take all night, but, excuse me. Alexander is, of course, an important element in the Shahnameh. You wouldn't necessarily think so, someone who destroyed the Persian Empire. But he's, I need another drink, he's absorbed into the canon of Iranian Shahs. Yeah, thank you. And I mentioned him particularly because some of the other paintings in the collection. That's a beautiful. I got my own, was that? It's very kind to give me his. This is called the Comfort Interrupts. I'll give you mine in case you want to try it. I was thinking actually of champagne, not water. Just trying to draw some connections. I mean, there are probably only 15 or 20 paintings, maybe a few more. We're trying to make a connection between some of them. Of course, Iskandar is an important subject, not only in the Shahnameh, but also in Nizami's quintet, the Khamsa. So I mentioned this, I think the next one is, this is Iskandar going to India, where he's been promised the daughter of the Indian ruler, who's exceptionally beautiful, together with 3 or 4 other marvels, to avoid Iskandar conquering India, which in fact Iskandar reneged on, but no one actually mentions that. Excuse me. This is another, this is not in Alexander, this is another story that I've personally done some work on. I'm quite interested. It's called the Davos Ruch, which is the 12 nights, the 12 combats. This is actually the first one, where Bijan, who's an Iranian knight, defeats Humayun, who is a senior Turanian commander. And to get him back to Iranian lines, they swap armour. This isn't necessarily built in the picture, but he puts on Humayun's armour and walks back through the Iranian, Turanian lines to get back to Iran. This is quite an unusual scene in the Shahnameh. Normally what you see is Bijan beheading Humayun because people love all this bloodshed. So you've got a bit of bloodshed down there, but basically this is something else. I chose this one because it's so spectacular, really. This is an 18th century Shahnameh from Lahore. And this is a part of the Shahnameh that isn't the Shahnameh. It's essentially the Gaushaspanameh followed by a Shahnameh. In fact, in the Christie's sale earlier this week, there was another manuscript of this for Shahnameh, a Gaushaspanameh in the front. But sort of love of demons here, I think, meets its actually pinnacle. You don't get much more demonic than this. And very lively, beautifully executed, of course. I mean, you might expect something fairly trashy coming along, but in fact, this is an immaculate piece. And I think it's part of a manuscript rather than just single sheets. So this is a rarity, frankly. This is Alexander again, from the Khamsa, which is what, as I mentioned before, I just picked out another Alexander story. This is not dissimilar in that this is the famous scene where Alexander goes to meet Queen Dushabeh incognito, but she's already had a portrait of him painted. So when he sits there, she says, "I know perfectly well who you are," and he hands him this picture as a nice bit of proof. And then this is the last one I chose, I think, which is another one from the Khamsa. And it's another battle scene, but it's not so amazingly different from the one from Lahore I showed you. And again, very fine painting and a nice mixture of the enemy being depicted in very sort of vivid colours and ethnic distinction. I mean, you know, they're fighting the Zanj, who are effectively Ethiopians. So to sum it all up, it's a remarkable collection you'll see there, of which only a small part is on display. And it was a great joy to work with Farjam. I'm very sorry he's not here. He was a very generous face when Firouzah and I went to Dubai earlier in the year, or late last year, and we went to his gallery where he had a very imaginative display of some massive modern art on the wall, and then lots of little pictures of Shahnameh manuscripts, bringing together exactly what you said, the modern and the traditional Persian works. This is just a massive token to his passion, really, and his skill in picking out things that are really interesting and worth looking at.
Yeah, looking at the images that you have selected as well, I mean, I don't know how representative they are of the rest of the collection, but it looks like he went for very dramatic scenes of people killing and crying, of all the passions, of all the extremes that you do find in the Shahnameh. And, you know, sometimes, you know, some manuscripts of the Shahnameh tend to sort of repeat scenes that are formal in the romance, battles galore, but he seems to have had an eye for the dramatic tones of some of those, you know, fragments of a manuscript that obviously, as it's lost its original context, we don't know how much more dramatic it interpreted some of its stories. You were, alongside a number of other scholars, you put together this wonderful website 20 years or so ago, the Shahnameh
25.
25, there you go, which I remember using, you know, very, very happily as I was working on my own dissertation. And so, how would you say his collection adds to the corpus that you have gathered over the years? Do we hear something new, or do we have something more as a result of his selection, in your view?
Yes, well, I'm glad you mentioned this, because actually we're celebrating the 25th anniversary of Shahnameh. The project started in 1999, and we're working on reviving the website, which unfortunately became unsustainable. And it's, of course, this collection hasn't yet been incorporated into it. And I think I've still got all the pictures I was sent, even though they're not all in the catalogue, so I sort of whack them in as well. And there's a lot to add, because as I mentioned very briefly in my little opening essay, I mean, every time you open a new manuscript or go to a collection, the Karaisi Shahnameh, you never know what you're going to find. And the extraordinary thing is, I think, that there's so much variation, even the texts, no two texts are identical. I mean, every one, it's a living work, and so all these pages, and unfortunately, of course, for many of the single sheets, we don't know, you know, they're like sort of stuff taken from an archaeological site where you don't know where the site was. We don't know what the whole cycle of illustrations in that particular manuscript might have been. Well, it's true, it's a very violent, it's basically a very violent story, so it's not surprising lots of heads rolling, but yeah, as I mentioned, that one of Bijan going through Turanian lines with Humayun's head. I mean, I don't remember more than one or two other pictures of this scene. So, and then once you've got all this data, it's just a resource, it's just a tool, you know, but basically you start asking questions. Why is this picture suddenly there? What's this doing in the whole cycle of that manuscript? You know, if you're interested in these things, there's just endless. I mean, there are just so many potential lines of inquiry and characterization, fidelity to the text. You know, yeah, I mean, it'll be great to, when we get live again, you'll see all these things.
Yeah, thank you.
Suitably analysed, of course, by the great professionals in the area.
You're right. I mean, it's an extraordinarily prolific text also in the way in which it keeps producing. The more you study it, and the more it produces versions of those tales that are, you know, that have no immediate equivalence. And it's wonderful that he has added to what we know, which is already very substantial, because the website has accumulated thousands of records.
Tens of thousands.
And he still managed to add, nuance, which kind of explains, it kind of situates the collection within the wider field, and something that I will come back to, because think about Dr. Farjam, his love of Iran, the passion for the Shahnameh, is only a fraction of this collection, and it would probably be a disservice to say that this collection is all about Iran, because it really isn't. And going and moving on to the other two volumes, which are the ones that deal with the modern and contemporary, what is striking is also that the modern and contemporary collection, although it focuses on the Middle East, is in fact embraces international modernism and actually establishes conversations with well-established artists from around the globe, which is actually quite unique in the way he went about it. And it's really, it makes the collection obviously quite exceptional. I was myself, really amazed by the vastity of it and by the span that it covers, and by the fact that he has also incorporated a number of artists from the UAE, which he supported over the years. And so, as Venetia managed to sort of get involved both with the historic and the contemporary collection, here was yet another challenge in terms of, trying to select from over 1,000 artists, not only the ones that could be representative, obviously, for a volume of highlights, but also, significantly representative of the collection itself. So can you tell us a little bit more about the blue volumes, the other two volumes?
The blue volumes. I want to actually, before I say, I just want to make a real tribute to Amir Ormand, who is Dr. Farjam's curator and has been for many years, who has been working on this collection for a very, very long time. And it's actually, I'm very grateful to him because he helped me produce this PowerPoint. So he's deeply knowledgeable about the collection. So we know that the collection is over 6,000 items. Now, out of that, he gave me the figure this morning. I was a bit staggered, actually. The modern and contemporary part of it is 2,284. So once we decided this wasn't going to be one book, but two, then it was a matter of choosing. And that was actually something that was very, very complicated to start with. So there were a group of us as editors, as Linda Komarov, Nada Shahut, Sarah Rogers, and myself. And we initially, it took us a very long time to work out how do you do this. Actually, general collections books are very difficult to do because you can cut the cake in a number of different ways. You could do the modern, and then you do the contemporary, but it gets so complicated as to what is modern and what is contemporary nowadays that we soon abandon that. Or you could do it, by country or region, and that wasn't going to work at all. So in the end, we did it alphabetically. And actually what was rather good about doing it alphabetically was that it meant that you really saw the diversity of it, because although I would say that the bulk of the artists are from what we might call Middle East and North Africa. I'm not going to go into that term again, but there are, a number of artists from South Asia as well. But I think what was it? As we struggled to kind of put this together in the early stages, we came up with a rather good solution, which is that we'd have it alphabetically with another army of amazing contributors who wrote essays and also entries. A huge amount of research, again, because we were really keen that for both volumes that the entries would really reflect the state of current knowledge, for both areas. But we came up with this scheme of a series of essays. I don't know if you can see the names of the people there, but also what we call sort of thought pieces. So those were sometimes quite short, focused on a particular artist, or some of us as editors would sort of interview artists as well. So that was in the end. That was how we put it together. But the thing that was kind of staggering to us was that actually this is not just about the collection, is not just about the Middle East and North Africa, is that he also, Dr. Farjam also has a very important collection of non-Middle Eastern contemporary art. And so we in the end didn't quite know what to do with that, because it's an incredibly important collection too. So we included various pieces within the introduction. So here you see the Andy Warhol and the Georg Baselitz. And so this is here really to emphasize the quality of the design, which is really so beautiful. So these all were the sections which introduced these essays or thought pieces, and there are a number of the writers here. Hamid Kashmir Shakan, I think Sultan Qasimi, I think you see here, and some of the writers too, really pleased. But so this is the thing about this book, is that it's such a pleasure to turn the, if you can actually lift it, it is a real pleasure to turn the pages. But I just wanted to show you a few highlights, really. Farham Shiri sadly died very recently, Abbas Kiarostami, and this is the most beautiful photograph, sort of absolute spread right across the double page. Ahmed Mustafa, Mahmoud Saeed, here you see Sabari, so here you see, these different Bulgarian, Abdelkarim. You see these beautiful, beautiful works. So there's a real balance of, very important modernists and contemporary artists as well. Kazim Haidar, Dial Zawi, here beautiful work by Samir Halabi, Tel Adnan, and Said Balbaki. Here, can you imagine? He's collecting this. I don't know where he's storing this piece. And the most wonderful photographs by Latif Al-Ani. And one of the things he'd been doing, actually, was these exhibitions in the DIFC. And the most recent one, curated, or fairly recently, curated by Moran Montazimi on these Latif Al-Ani photographs, which are absolutely wonderful. And then the last one is, I wanted this here because it's a real tribute to Tariq al-Hussein, and also makes us think about Palestine as well. So that's the last of the images. But I think that was the thing. Once we got through the how to make the selection, and there were so many different cuts, that I think we've achieved something which is really truly representative of the collection, but also represents the subject as well. Of course, as Amir pointed out to me this morning, only 13% of this collection has been published. So I'm hoping he doesn't have more books in goes with another round of applause. Exactly.
Thank you, Venetia. In the time that remains, I just wanted to turn more broadly about the role of private collecting and the relationship with museums, because, we are in a place where collections are collections of collections. As museum people, we inherit collections of collections, and there is quite an interesting new trend in the foundation of some museums, particularly in the region where the drives and the principles, the way in which collecting is being done is different from the way in which Western museums have collected. And so, Dr. Raby, as you have been the director of a museum, and you have seen it both as an academic and as an institutional figure. I just wanted to have your views about the synergies essentially between the private and the public, and how do you see in particular maybe the Farjam collection sort of contributing to the way in which the field of Islamic art in particular, we can start with that, continues to evolve as a field of artistic practice.
There's a very facile and sadly growing antipathy towards the private collector. And I think this is an extremely sad situation because actually, if you look at almost all national museums, they have been built out of the passion and energy of private collectors. So, just think of the Islamic collection here. You think of Henderson. You think of France. You think of Eckstein. You think of Godwin. Remove those figures, and you're left with a porcelain. You could say exactly the same for the V&A. You could say the same for the Louvre. It's certainly true of the Met. So while that is, in some cases, led to a collection of collections, there are many collectors who are panoptic. They'll collect across the world. And there are others who are quite different. I'm trying to argue here that we should not pigeonhole private collectors as if they are of one species. There are others who are monocular, whose passion about one tiny thing not only contributes to the collecting of the objects, but to the knowledge in the field. So Francesca mentioned about my experience at a museum. The National Museum of Asian Art, as it's now called, in Washington, D.C., was actually formed from two museums, both of which were founded by private individuals. The Freer Gallery of Art and the Arthur M. Sackler Gallery. And both of them acquired some huge private collections. All you have to think about is the Verveer collection of Persian paintings. In other words, the entire field has been based on a relationship between national museums, if you like, the host institution, and the generosity of private individuals. In fact, in many cases, the foundation of those museums have been in a private collection. And this is particularly true when you think of really what should be the future of the Esteemed collection in Kuwait, an extraordinary collection of some 30,000 objects. The irony there is it's still looking for a final home. Now with the Farjam collection, we see how, in a way, there are two elements to his collecting. His historical collection is, I would say, traditional. It very much follows the course that almost every Islamic art collection that is attempting to be broad has followed since the late 19th century. But we've just heard about the extraordinary depth of his modern and contemporary. And there you see the willingness to be a trailblazer. And what he's achieved is something that no other public collection has achieved. It's through almost a ferocity of intention. His passion, his willingness to host a car with quite a lot of things on it, his willingness to house these things, his willingness to collect artists in depth. So that range and depth is something that really marks this out. But that combination too, if you like, the blue book and what's the other one called? The black book.
It's black.
The blue and black, together form something exceptional. Now, how you use that, how you create those dialogues that open up our eyes? I don't know. That's up to young ones in the crowd. But there is a potential there. This is the creation of an asset that really should be the foundation of a new museum. It's an achievement, and I think we should all raise a glass to Farjam for it really. It's a stupendous achievement. But I really want us to move away from this sanctimonious veneration of national museums and the antipathy towards the private collector. It is completely misplaced. The two belong together. They may tussle at times. And often I'm sad to see our national collections here not dipping into the market as much as they should. But we must not allow the notion that there is some, if you like, good on one side, bad on the other. It's, I think, creating a sense of moral antagonism that is actually misplaced. So, the key thing I want you to go away with is the notion of the black and the blue.
Thank you. Thank you. Julian. So rather than in a conference, we have a clock that reminds us of when we are every 15 minutes of the hour. So we have probably covered our 45 minutes, and I know and I expect that there are questions in the audience for the panel. So I would like to open the floor to questions, and I welcome anyone. Just make sure you speak loudly, or if you prefer, maybe the microphone could be passed around. Yeah. Thank you. Anyone wanting to comment? Please, Rosemary.
Question for Julian, if I may. Julian, I think the one criticism that's made of private collections is that they're not as representative as national. The national museums have a duty for being representational. Would you like to address that and say a few words about representation, say in a collection like this?
So when we talk about national collections, we need to actually see that there are many functions. There are some that tend to be universal museums and to be as wide a conspectus of objects as possible. But there are others that are actually, where the word national really does mean that they have collected mostly from their own region. So when you compare a collection like the Farjam collection, where he has very carefully selected across geographies and periods, that is presenting a panoramic view of Islamic art in a way that actually not that many national collections achieve. Yes, of course you could say that nowhere can compete to the Hermitage or the Met or whatever, but there's a willingness there to be as broad as possible that I highly respect. So, but then the implicit also in that question is there actually a problem if a private collection is heavily focused? And I would say actually quite the opposite. I think it's wondrous that Yeah, I can remember one quite youngish collector in Washington who was interested only in a Japanese printmaker of the 1920s. And he was obsessed, and he would eventually acquire almost every single thing that this person ever produced. Well, did it excite me personally? Not really, I didn't like the artist very much. But what an amazing achievement. And you could see that becoming the foundation of a research project, a major publication. In other words, I think width is wonderful, and I think depth is also wonderful. And I think you see those tensions in all museums. The willingness to look broad, but in many cases actually only the assets to look quite narrowly.
Everyone's stunned. I think you all would just want to get your hands on the books. Can we thank the team at the British Museum for incredible organisation, and Madison and all your colleagues really for just making everything so easy for us here. Thank you so much. And as I'm the only one of the editors here, I want to again thank the team at Yale for their incredible work. And I didn't manage first to mention Angeline and Robert Davis, who were the editors on the Modern Contemporary volume. But all of them, it's been an absolute pleasure to work with Yale University Press. I mean, just one of the great presses in the world. And so it's just been fantastic.
Which is also, I guess, where you buy the book, in case you're interested. I'm not being paid shares for pitching the book, but it's just, indeed, just to stress out what a beautiful gift, this set represents, and what an essential tool in any good library of Islamic art. So we will all, I'm sure, encourage Oxford to actually purchase them. If there are no more questions, I'd like to just thank the panelists tonight, Venetia, Charles, and Julian, for helping us understanding, how this wonderful collection sits within the wider field of both Islamic art and modern and contemporary art. Again, take your time to look at the books, and above all, take your time, given that the galleries are open, to go and look at the real stuff in the Al-Bukhari galleries down the corridor. And I would also like to send the warmest wishes, obviously, to Dr. Farjam, who wasn't able to be with us tonight, but I hope that the cameras are capturing our chats, and we'll send in, a big debt of gratitude and all warmest wishes from all of us. Thank you.